Okay, welcome to our first webinar for 2023. My name is Helen Potgieter and I will be representing the Clinical Engineering Association of South Africa, KESA. Special welcome to KESA members, associates, the council members, and also corporate members who make these webinars possible. Today's webinar will be presented by Medhold Medical, represented by Lebo Tshabalala and Meri Steenkamp. They will be speaking on a variety of very interesting topics on the technical and clinical applications of the fourth generation Vinci robot, surgical robot. I will do a short introduction of our presenters, and then we will also ask all our attendees to keep their microphones on mute for the duration of the presentation. You are, however, welcome to add any comments or questions to the chat box for our records, and then we will address them in the last 10 minutes of the presentation. We will open the floor for questions. Firstly, we have Lebo Tshabalala. She's the business unit manager for the robotics division. Lebo has joined Medhold in 2019. She holds a BTech in diagnostic radiography and a master's degree in public health. She's a Chevening Scholar and Mandela Washington Fellow, and she is intuitive Da Vinci, clinical, sales, and technical trained. Then we have Meri Steenkamp. She's a field service engineer also for the robotics division. Meri recently joined Medhold in 2022, and she holds a national diploma in electrical engineering. She also has a variety of experience and training on a Da Vinci, Linux, nuclear, and ultrasound, as well as other patient monitoring, anesthetics, ventilation, and temperature management technologies. We are looking forward to this presentation, and over to you, Lebo.
Thank you so much, Helen, for the great introduction. I'll jump straight into it. So as Helen has said, my name is Lebo Tshabalala, and my colleague and I will be speaking on the fourth generation Da Vinci robot, touching on just the technical and clinical application of the robotic system. And basically it's just a high level overview of the system, what it does. And I will delve into the introduction of the company that we work for, which is Medhold Medical, the history of robotics and surgery, and then we will touch on the Da Vinci system itself and really look at where we are in South Africa in terms of the adoption curve for robotic surgery in the medical industry. So Medhold Medical is a leading supplier of world-class medical devices and the technology that we supply to the healthcare sector in Southern Africa. So we cover the whole of ROSA, from anesthesia to robotics. We represent big international brands such as GE Healthcare, Getinge, ConMed, Radiometer, and Intuitive most recently, and the others that you see on the screen there. So our legacy and motivation is to redefine healthcare through technology while striving continuously in the unwavering commitment of healthcare excellence and talented staff as well as innovative partners. And this is where the collaboration between us as Medhold and Intuitive came along in 2021. And we have currently over 70 robotic surgeons trained in South Africa, with Intuitive having been around for the last 27 years globally. So if I may ask one brave person who can go or unmute themselves, or maybe even write it in the chat, what they understand about the word robot, or what is the definition of a robot. Helen, you can let me know if there's any takers in the chat.
Nothing yet. I think you'll have to put us out of our misery.
Okay, that is fine. That's fine. So the robot is defined, especially in science fiction, as a machine that resembles a human being, and it's able to replicate certain human movements and functions automatically. So these machines perform these types of behaviors and motions like we do as human beings autonomously. So when did we start seeing the emergence of robotics in the medical industry? So the medical robots first came into experimental use in surgical settings in the 1980s, but the technology did not become fully developed before the 1990s. The first application of a medical robot occurred in the 1980s, and this is the robot that you see here now, the Puma 560. It was used to perform a CT-guided brain biopsy. So the first application of the robot in the medical industry was in the neurosurgical world. Very brave of the inventors there. 3 years later, obviously, we saw, the same platform being used on a transurethral resection, which is a surgery that is used to treat urinary problems that are caused by an enlarged process. Only a decade later did we really start seeing an increase in robotic use in surgery and in medicine. As many of you may know, this system that is on the screen currently, this is an intuitive surgical Da Vinci robot. And if you ask any surgeon who does urology, gynecology, pelvic floors, and general surgery, they will tell you that once they start using this platform, I mean, it changes their lives tremendously. The Da Vinci robot has been the platform that's used predominantly on abdominal and transthoracic procedures. And to give you a little bit of a background on Intuitive, the makers of Da Vinci robot, over the last 25 years, they have invested a lot in research and development, and they're really pioneering in capabilities in the OR, transforming the field of minimally invasive surgery through more than 10 million surgeries having been performed on this platform. They have really become the leader in surgical robotics, increasing the adoption of minimally invasive surgery. I don't know if any of you in the audience have had the opportunity to play with the Da Vinci before, but essentially this robot will have 4 arms, 4 robotic arms. The first thing is the surgeon has to deploy these arms into the patient's body or the instruments using the robotic arms. They would then make the incision and put the arm with the instrument within the patient's belly. And using an endoscope, which is a camera, they will now have a 3D visualization of the fields that they're actually working on. And then what the surgeon then does is scrub out, and then they walk a few meters away from the patient and sit on what we call the surgeon console. Then they would sit down, and it's almost like playing a video game at this point in time. Here they are seated, they have a view or a digital view of the image, watching themselves operate and having access to the patient's belly. I would like to show you a very short video of what I just described. Please post any questions on the chat. So that is basically the Da Vinci 4th generation. That is the latest one that has been released by Intuitive. So if you look at the precision engineered robotic systems itself, it's proven over time the advantage of it having it in a surgical setting, which demands highly precise placement for the safety of the patient and the effectiveness of the operation. So the robot would then be very much consistent if you have tremor, which most people have, especially after having coffee or after a rough night out. The Da Vinci robot would then have a tremor filter. So it essentially bypasses some of the deficiencies that you would have as a human, giving you a more stable platform to operate on. The other feature that is, very advantageous for the surgeon is the control. So the control that the surgeon gets is so much better than what you have as a human, because our degrees of motion are limited, but the Da Vinci has the degrees of motion that we simply don't have as humans, which is 7 degrees of motion. With the robot, you can then look into places that you cannot simply look at with the naked eye, and that's just some of the advantages that you see there: vision, precision, and control. So where is the Da Vinci robotic system being utilized in surgery? Currently, it's being utilized in general surgery, colorectal, bariatrics, thoracic, urology, and gynecology. And if you really look at the clinical outcomes of, robotics versus conventional surgery, the better patient outcomes is what we really should be striving for as the people that actually work in healthcare. These benefits include reduced hospital stay, reduced in-hospital transfusions. We know that, hospital transfusions are costly, reduced complication rates, and reduced blood loss. And for the hospital itself, utilizing the technology, they get to benefit from an ecosystem that includes support and analytics, training and education, and innovation and integration. I thought, for interest's sake, because some people would be wondering at this point, how much does this system cost? The real question is the comprehensive cost of care. When we not just looking at the capital cost of equipment, looking at this iceberg, you look at the comprehensive cost of care. There are so many costs that are not even spoken of in conventional surgery, but we know they are there and are only considered in hindsight, and they cost the hospitals a lot of money. This iceberg is then a representation of the hidden costs, like the length of stay, ICU admissions, conversion rates, and complication rates. So, for example, if you had to ask, or had to ask one of you now to just, tell me how much a unit of blood costs, and then the impact thereof, if you had the opportunity to impact that matrix, how much would then would it impact, your cost per procedure if you had to calculate it in rand value? So looking globally, the numbers for the procedures that are being done globally on the robot with the Da Vinci specifically, there's currently over 1.5 million being done. And this is the stats from 2021, with over 7,500 systems that are in clinical use. Where are we as South Africa in this journey of robotics? So our market is clearly still in its infant stages, although the first robot was installed in South Africa in 2013. And this is our current install base, with only 2 of the latest Da Vinci Xi robotic systems installed in the public sector in the Western Cape. So we have a total of about 11 robotic systems in the country installed. Again, globally, we have seen exponential growth in the number of procedures being done robotically, especially in general surgery. The South African curve would look very different to this curve that you see on the screen, because 80% of our procedures being done in South Africa are in urology. And due to a number of factors, including the slow uptake of funders to start reimbursing robotic procedures, which I'm sure some of you know, in specialities such as general surgery. But we do believe that this will start changing. And in fact, it has started to change due to the number of systems that we are being installed in the country currently. I thought I'd also give you just a brief overview. I won't spend too much time on the slides, just to show you the journey that a surgeon would go through for them to become accredited as a robotic surgeon. So it's a series of 4 stages that can take anything from 3 to 6 months, depending on the surgeon's commitment. The phases include the introduction to the technology. They would then have to go on a wet lab to have their certificates or do a 2-day training where they are certified, including online assessment. And all these 2 phases are happening in conjunction with the surgeon and their assistant, as well as the OR team, because unlike conventional surgery, robotic surgery really depends on the team efficiency for it to become successful, or for you to build a successful robotics program. Then we do the phase 3, which the surgeon would then come back after qualifying to operate under the guidance of a proctor that is qualified to proctor them in that particular procedure. And then we would then move on to advanced training and pivoting them to doing more than one procedure robotically. I will then hand over to Meri to just touch on the technical application for the Da Vinci robot. Meri, over to you.
Thanks, Lebo. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to quickly go over what we basically as FSEs do in the background to ensure uptime with these robots and also ensure patient safety. So basically, we have a dashboard that we work on every day of our lives constantly. The ISU on its own, it gives us, say, weekly updates on any changes on service manuals. If there's failures on a certain amount of robots, everything comes through on a weekly basis. So we are up to date on everything that's going on worldwide with each robot before we even go to site. Then we have a function on these robots, which we call on-site. So basically what on-site does is the robot connects to intuitive service via a network. And with the help of on-site, we can use, for instance, Artemis. So we have a secure login into basically to view live logs and errors on the robot. This can be done during procedures, everything. This will help us to give live support, remote support basically to procedures while they may say they're busy with the operation, the error comes up, nobody knows surely what to do. We can quickly log in, have a look and tell the doctor, say, reboot system or stow away the arm or so on. This is the same issue for us when troubleshooting. It helps us to have an idea of what is going on with the robot as is, and then we know exactly which parts we need to have ready for when we go on site to immediately do replacement. With on-site, we also have another function called DVStat. It's a group of engineers in Europe, which is basically on standby 24/7. They're also using on-site and Artemis basically to view live logs of the robot. And they basically help us by any failures that's upcoming, any specs that's out of range, they can let us know. And so this will help us to prevent system down, because we will basically be replacing certain spares even long before they've actually failed. We can see they're starting to be working out of range long before full failure happens. So with the menu on the other side is what we use to connect to the robot, which is only possible when we are on site with a service laptop. So with this app, we call it the launch menu. So we connect with a network cable through to the surgeon car, or basically the old robot at the back. And with this, we can do everything from running diagnostics, updating software, calibrations, preventative maintenance, whichever is needed. And like I said, this is only possible on site. This cannot be done from remote support. So basically, when it comes down to when you're logging in remotely, you cannot control the robot at all. It's only for viewing purposes. And it's also only viewing the logs. There is no patient information available, no imaging either. So, and the only way to control it is if you act literally on site and physically touching the robot. So this is just a little overview from what we're doing on the background to ensure uptime on these robots, because yes, as you can imagine, they can be sometimes time consuming on their own. But thanks, Lebo.
Thanks, Meri. And just to continue on the what you just said, I mean, from our side as the clinical team, we've also got access to view the procedures being done, like she said, but without the patient's details, when it is being done and by whom is it being done. We also get to see the instruments and accessories that are being utilized on the robot in a particular time. Then we are also able to follow the surgeon's training pathway using these platforms that you see on screen. So basically, when we sell a system to a hospital, we always make sure that they understand that we are not just selling a robot. It's a program which consists of a complex network of interconnected systems. And this is the intuitive system, that ecosystem that includes patients, surgeons, and hospitals in one pillar, the innovation and integration of the system that includes all the instruments and accessories, and then the training and education of the surgeon, the OR staff team, the hospital administrators, including support and analytics for the robot. So it has to work in an ecosystem. Otherwise, your robotic system will not work. If there's one word I'd like for you to remember, you know, even if you forget everything I've said in the last few minutes, it's an ecosystem. And yes, the technology is the foundation, but is it enough? It's not really enough. You need other factors place for you to have an efficient program. As you know, a disconnected OR environment would pose further challenges in reducing variability to healthcare teams, which ultimately costs the hospitals a lot of money. And I would just like to close by emphasizing on ours and Intuitive's ecosystem of having a highly integrated system of value-based technologies for the betterment of the patients. And thank you. I just put there our contact details with Meri. If this was obviously a very high level overview of the system. If you are interested in us coming to the hospital to come and do a presentation of, you know, go deeper into the details of the systems, you are welcome to contact us directly. Over to you, Helen.
Okay, so we have a couple of questions. The first one was for budgeting purposes. I've actually received some private messages, so I've just posted them also on the chat box.
Yeah.
Okay, so for budgeting purposes, I know that you did speak about the capital expense, and that's not the only thing that you need to consider. But obviously, there is a cost implication, and for budgeting purposes, it would be great to have an understanding of how much a system like that would cost, all inclusive, obviously.
Okay, so I will just give you like a ballpark figure. Obviously, there's other factors to take into consideration, which we did not mention, whether the, you know, your hospital CSSD has the right, you know, reprocessing equipment for the instruments and accessories. So those costs add up. But for the robot itself, on a ballpark figure, you're looking at between 28 million to 40 million with the current rate of exchange.
Okay. Can you also tell me what other services are required when you do an installation like this? Obviously, there's space requirements. I see the second question. There was another one on dimensions that also talks to the space availability, electricity, if there should be data. So can you maybe elaborate on that?
Meri, do you want to take that, or should I?
Sure, Lebo. So electricity specifically, so we're not running on three-phase. As you saw, we have three main components. Each one just runs off normal 220 AC voltage. Space-wise, I've seen this robot being used in quite small theaters, but it would be preferable in a bit more space, especially with our new range of robots, which does have much larger size. And naturally, for the data connection, we do require a data point inside theater from the hospital side, so we can connect to our service and be able to do our remote support as well. Dimensions on it, Lebo, I'm not sure if you have any idea on the dimensions, because it's quite different between the robots, and especially with our patient cart, there's a huge difference between when it's stowed and when it's fully ready to go, basically.
We can share this information.
Sorry, yes, I think the main question would be that if you want to implement it in a specific theatre, obviously there's standard sizes of theatres, and how easy is it to accommodate such a unit in a standard theatre? Will it fit, or would you need to actually plan for it in building projects?
So normally, Helen, what we do with any project like installing a robotic system, we would go on site to obviously assess the current theatre spaces that the hospital have, but we have not had instances where a hospital has had to build a special theatre for the robot. I mean, one of our smallest theatres is in Cape Town, and it's like the size, I don't know, I can't remember the size, but it is very small. So we do go on site to determine whether the robot will fit, and we find the appropriate space within the theatre floor for the robot to fit in.
Right, thank you very much. Then we had a question with regards to electricity stability and so on. As we know, we have quite a lot of issues in South Africa with load shedding. Yes. And what would be the impact of that? I think the lady there asked for if there would be a surgeon on standby. Obviously it's surgeon operated, so there should be a surgeon there. But can you maybe elaborate on that?
Yes, so the electricity issue in South Africa is huge. So we have seen some impact on it already with the robotic system. So the system has about 5 minutes to shut down after the power goes off. And this is essentially to give the surgeon the opportunity to undock. And undocking means to remove the instrumentation out of the patient if they were already inside the patient. They would then convert. This is when I spoke about conversion rates earlier. They would convert to either open or laparoscopy within that space to complete the procedure.
Right. How long does it typically take for a surgeon to be competent in doing cases with the Vinci robot? I think you did mention the stages, 3 to 6 months.
Yes.
And is this robotic surgery already part of the university's curriculum? So that I would not know.
Not yet. Like I said, we have 2 only installed in the Western Cape. It is in the academic space, and so we are looking at building a curriculum. As you can understand, in the academic universities you actually have a very high turnover of registrars coming in and out, so with assistants they change every week. So we are working with the universities to build that into the program.
Okay, so just building on that answer that you've got, you mentioned that there's 2 units currently available in academic hospitals, and that's only in the Cape at this moment.
Yeah, at this moment, for now it's only in the Cape in the public sector.
And the rest would then be public,
the rest would then be private.
Sector.
Yes, all private.
Right. Does this robot have a internal endoflator? That's an interesting question. Yes.
Meri, you're going to take this one? It's more technical.
Actually, it doesn't have an internal one. It's external, but it does fit onto the vision card. So at this stage, we're using our ConMed version, but as far as I know, it doesn't really matter which one you use. It comes down to the basics. So it's not supplied by Intuitive. It's an external. So you can decide which one you want on your system. But like I said, there is space on the vision card for it above the Irby, basically.
Yeah, these are the right questions to ask when you actually think of capital expenditure and when you have to implement it, because there is other factors that also, or other components that plays a role during the surgery that you need to consider buying. Okay, what would be the clinical engineers now in this case, they mean the clinical engineer that's on site.
The hospital, yes, the hospital's engineer, yeah.
What would their responsibility be with regards to the management of the system, and to what extent do you train people that are not employed by you, but by the hospitals to give technical support?
So essentially for the clinical engineers, there isn't much training that is given. The only training would then obviously be for troubleshooting. But other than that, you do have an FSE that is always on call to attend to the issues. However, on installation of the system, they go through the system with the clinical engineer to make sure that they are always on site with the system, and that's the internet of the hospital. And the clinical engineer is obviously responsible for the infrastructure of the hospital. That's where they would be responsible in maintaining that the system is always online.
Thank you. Then we've got some more questions on the chat box. Is it true that the endo wrist instrument, sorry, I'm not sure if I'm now pronouncing that correctly, can only be used 10 times before they need to be replaced? I don't know about that.
So our instruments, it is endo wrist instruments. So they have lives, what we call lives, between 10 to 18. It used to be 10 lives only, but over the last 2 years, Intuitive has increased the number of lives, ultimately also reducing the cost per procedure to the patient. If you think about it, if an instrument was, charged on 10 lives and it's now got 8 extra lives, then it means you can use it more than, up to about 18 times. So it's between 10 to 18 lives on the instruments.
Okay, and then what is the sterilizing requirements of the instruments and the robot itself?
So
there was some plastic covers and stuff that you were using.
The drapes, yes. So we do have the sterilizing requirements, which it's a very long list of validated sterilizing equipment that we can share with. I can't obviously name all of them now, that we can share with everybody that's on the call, but it has to be Intuitive validated because of the length of the instruments, because of the way the instruments have to be washed. The specific ones that are validated for the robot use. And then the robot itself, obviously the sterilizing would be the draping. The plastic you saw on the video was actually the draping of the robot. So each arm is draped on its own, and the column of the robot is also draped. The only piece of equipment that it's not being sterilized or with outside the sterilization field is the vision cart and the surgeon console, but the patient cart remains in the sterilized field.
Thank you very much. And then we've got a last question. Which channels should I follow if I want to be a robotics technician? And how long is this training? And please give me a price estimate if possible. And also maybe add to that, where can one learn to become a robotics technician? Because that's obviously a more specialized field than the general clinical engineering training that we receive.
Helen, I'd be lying if I said I know exactly where, but as a company for Medhold, obviously if you are employed as a technician and we have the technology available and you need to be trained on the technology, Intuitive we would then send you on an Intuitive field service engineer training within Medhold for you to be certified to work on the Da Vinci. But as per robotics, because there's many robots that are available in the market, not just Da Vinci, I don't think we have an idea of where that is particularly happening at this point in time.
Okay, so it would be directly from the supplier.
From the supplier, yes.
Oh, there's another one. Just give me a moment. Okay, so it's basically adding to the original question of what would be the ballpark figure of the cost of ownership and service-wise over 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah,
can we send David this information separately, because there's a lot of factors that we need to put into cost of ownership for 10 years. So we are unable to give you a ballpark figure at the moment.
Yes. Okay, so if there's any other questions, especially technical or cost-related questions, I think if you send an email to Dieter, to Kisa, Dieter, if you can maybe just on the screen show us again the contact details for yourself, then they will forward that to Medhold, and then they can directly contact you with the relevant information.
Thank you, Helen.
Okay, so if there's no other questions, thank you very much for this presentation. It was very interesting, and I think we've all learned a lot, because that's not something that we work with on a day-to-day basis. Thank you, everybody, for attending our webinar, and we hope to see you in the following webinars for 2023. Have a good day.